Okay, well, welcome everyone. My name is Caitlin Sutton and I work here at the library in the Allport collection. And firstly, I would just like to acknowledge the Marinina people, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay respect to elders past and present. So I first became interested in Ada Butler's distinctive style of painting in 2016 after acquiring a collection of photographs and two sketchbooks that complemented the existing holdings of her botanical paintings in the collection. As it turns out, these are the only examples of her work in any public institution. The Allport collection here contains around 3,000 paintings, prints and sketchbooks, and including many fascinating examples of little-known and particularly women artists. And as you would have observed on your way in, the Allport is temporarily closed at the moment in case anyone is grouped with the passion to go down there after this talk, but we will be reopening with a new exhibition once the foyer works are completed, fingers crossed. So to date, no formal biography of Ada Butler has been published, and in the short stubs of entries available about her, her date of death is incorrect and her name is spelt wrong. Yet the archive and the Allport collection are brimming with content, and luckily for me, her descendants have also stepped in and very generously filled in some of the unofficial gaps in the record. Ada was part of a cohort of artists who were involved in the early stages of the Art Society of Tasmania, which was cleverly rebranded in 1892, but more on that later. So this research is very much a work in progress, and we'll explore both the life and work of Ada Butler, but we'll also go down some semi-related tangents. And I will leave time at the end as well for anyone who might be interested in looking at some of her original paintings. Okay, so known affectionately to her friends and family as Adie, Ada Butler lived across 2 centuries and through World War I. She was the daughter of Alfred Butler, this sort of 19th century Tom Hardy, and also Frances Matilda Groom, absolute style icon. Just love her style. So now, as it's Family History Month, we'll just go back through some generations for a bit of genealogical fun. So Alfred's father, Edward Payne Butler, was born in Surrey in England, and was son of the well-known lawyer Gamaliel Butler. Here he is. I will say a few words about Gamaliel because of his genetic legacy, which was mostly due to his incredible wife, Sarah. So by the age of 38, she had already had 10 children. And I know it was common, but I'm still in awe. So then they left those children in England, came out here, had 6 more children, the last one when she was 46. And so this Butler family tree became a forest with many branches and offshoots here in Tasmania. On the sides of this family in contemporary Hobart, you've probably heard of Australia's oldest law firm, Butler, McIntyre and Butler, same family. The Hobart Memorial Congregational Church was designed by the 4th son of Gamaliel and Sarah Butler, Francis, and the Commercial Bank, and also Sheen, all designed by Frances Butler. The diarist GTWB Boys described Gamaliel as one of the richest lawyers and greatest rogues in the country. The colonial artist Wainwright also painted a number of Butler family members, including 3 daughters, incidentally. Now, back to Ada's mother. Frances Matilda Groom was born in 1845 to parents Francis Charles Groom and Matilda Minute, incidentally the same Groom family as Ray Groom, former Premier of Tasmania. They lived at the property named Harefield in Fingal. Her father Francis had purchased it in 1841 and renamed it from Logie to Harefield, named after Harefield in Middlesex, where the family were from. Not very original. So this is the house that Ada Butler's mother grew up in, and it's now a heritage listed property and still standing. In a winter ceremony on the 29th of July, 1869, at the age of 23, Ada's mother married 28-year-old Alfred Butler at this church in Cullinswood in the Fingal Valley, and that's her just 1 year before the wedding. Soon after Alfred and Frances were married, they moved from Hobart to Victoria, and their first son was born in 1870. I haven't been able to track down the exact birth month because I always like to check for a shotgun wedding, but anyway, married in 1869, first son in 1870, and then their next son, who was adorably named Otley, family name, eventually became a bank official. Then Ada was born in 1874, and her birth was registered all the way out in Clunes, Victoria, way up there. So yes, she was not born here, okay, but we still claim her because she came back to Tasmania as a child. So Ada's mother, Frances, was very fond of the developments in photography that had occurred during the course of her lifetime, and she had her own portrait taken at least a dozen times. She also went on to have Ada photographed several times during her childhood. This photo was taken around 1877 when Ada was about 3 years old, and it was in Geelong. By the age of around 7 in 1881, with her little doll, Ada and her mother were back in Tasmania, and here she was being photographed in Hobart. Now, what the official records don't show, but what I have been told by descendants, is that the marriage between Ada's parents was real bad, and though they were never officially divorced, they were effectively separated. Frances moved back to Tasmania with Ada, and the family believes the sons stayed in Victoria with Alfred, and indeed Alfred lived the rest of his life on the mainland. So Ada appeared to have very little contact with her father. In fact, Ada and her mother moved back to Harefield in Fingal, Frances' childhood home, which would make sense after no doubt finding themselves in a very difficult financial position. They appear to have stayed there until at least 1883, when Frances managed to pick up some teaching work. And in her teaching application, which is held in the archives, she states she had 3 to 4 years of teaching experience. So here, here we come to a slight chronological and subject matter sidestep, but it is relevant. So the first generation of Allport family members to arrive in Van Diemen's Land in 1831 were Mary Morton Allport and her husband Joseph, and she would go on to become the first professional female artist in the Australian colonies. As it turns out, the Allport and Butler families intermingled significantly, and Mary Morton wrote about her daily social interactions with the family back in the 1850s, so we are going back in time a bit here. So the Allports regularly visited 2 properties owned by the Butlers, one of them being Stoll in Battery Point. There it is there, and it's in the background here. Historically significant interest in that. So in 1852, Mary Morton observed, Dick and Alfred Butler came to ask if we would go to Stoll on Wednesday to dance in honour of the doctor's approaching nuptials with Miss Smith at Sydney. Dick and I played muff whist against Mr. Reed and Minnie and lost 10 points. Meta talked books to Alfred, and in the energy of their discussion called him dear. Another dry observation from Mary Morton was on the 23rd of December in 1852, which I think really captures the notion of the Butler family being enormous. There was no one to sing but Mrs. C. Butler, who was rather nervous. The evening was decidedly muffy, and the company consisted chiefly of the gentleman from the Derwentwater and 9 butlers. In another letter in 1857, she wrote, "Danced every dance with Miss Goldie. That was the most I danced with anyone. Desperate flirtation between her and A. Butler. One of the butlers will have her yet, but they're not worthy of her for better-natured girls." I think this may, I think this may have been Alfred Butler, Ada's father, possibly. Haven't completely confirmed that, but he was a teenager at the time. Now for the real connection. Mary Morton Allport would go on to teach various members of the Butler family art lessons, including Ada, according to her descendants. This is very telling, particularly because of Ada's love of native Tasmanian species and the background formula she often used in her works, which was likely inspired by Mary Morton. Incidentally, one of Mary's naughty sons, Curzon, etched. Oh, hang on. Wait. Oh, yeah, no, that was bad. Incidentally, one of Mary Morton's naughty sons, Curzon, etched his signature in a glass panel of a French door at Sheen, where they were frequent visitors, and the signature is still there today. So there's Mary with her children. Assuming most of you will be familiar with Sheen, which has been converted into a distillery and is currently run by Lark. As I mentioned earlier, it was designed by one of Gamaliel's sons and remained in the family until its sale in 1951. The Sheen estate originally stretched from Pontville to Tea Tree and on through Richmond. In 2016, the Allport was approached by one of Ada Butler's descendants, by the Kernkeys at Sheen, who were restoring the property. And as I mentioned, we were able to acquire acacia material from the family, including more photographs, sketchbooks, and 5 other artworks. The photographs we acquired, as well as those that were already held in the archives collection, have meant that we have this remarkable record of her face over time. So this is Ada Butler as a young woman. Here she is with her mother. Again, a little bit older. Group shot, she's in the middle there. As a young girl, Ada developed her skills as an artist, and at the peak of her career, she was offering her work for sale via the Art Society of Tasmania annual exhibitions. In 1894, at the age of 20, she attended the Tasmanian exhibition. This was a very big deal in Hobart and was the hot ticket in town, and a number of the Butler family went as well. This ticket also shows that her and her mother were living in Macquarie Street at this time, and that is confirmed by valuation rolls. They were renting a property at what was 305 Macquarie Street. Around this time, Ada became interested in the Art Society of Tasmania, joining in 1898. In total, she exhibited in their exhibitions 4 times in Hobart and once in Launceston. Details confirmed with the help of the Trustee Artists Index on our website. So just a little background on there's the Tasmanian exhibition. Background on the Art Society of Tasmania. So in the 1892 annual report, after referring to the changing of the name from the Art Association to the Art Society of Tasmania, the Secretary gave a resume of the work done during the past year. He tendered to Lady Hamilton his most sincere and heartfelt thanks for the very valuable time and assistance so ungrudgingly bestowed upon the Society, which is now a society not of dilettante dabblers in art, but a body of a few earnest, honest workers determined to show Lady Hamilton their great appreciation of her interest and to make the Art Society of Tasmania a memorial worthy of her who has done so much in the case of art and education during her too short stay among them. Lady Hamilton, in reply, said she was deeply touched by the earnest expression of feeling shown by those present, and that the work given her to do suited her temperament and therefore was congenial. The next year, the Art Society had managed to secure William Charles Pigney as a judge. He was described as a leading landscape artist of Australia and gave pointers to the beginners, strongly recommending that they paint in black and white before commencing colours. His words clearly made an impact, and several years later, in 1899, it was noted that there were no less than 74 subjects in black and white watercolours exhibited in the show. Some of the other members of the Art Society included Horton Forrest, Arthur Streeton, Lucian DeShano, Mabel Hookey, John Eldershaw, Lily Allport, Edith Holmes, Dorothy Stoner, and Joseph Connor. Though other sources have cited that Ada Butler became treasurer to the Art Society in 1884, she would have only been 10 years old at the time, so unless she was some kind of financial prodigy, I think this is unlikely. But as far as I can tell, she joined when she was age 24. And I haven't been able to track down any of the actual works that she exhibited, only the titles. But I will show you the other works we hold in the Allport. Unusually, it is a collection of Tasmanian native flowers painted in oil. Her works feature recognisable native species set against dramatic, moody landscape backgrounds. In 1899, Ada exhibited the painting with Zyria in her first Art Society exhibition. In 1900, aged 26, Ada had two paintings exhibited, Sweet Pea and Winter Roses. Her father's side of the family were there in support at the opening of this exhibition. The Mercury newspaper described the event, noting, Mr. C.L. Hodgman's prize for flowers in watercolours commended Miss A.D. F. Butler, Winter Roses, and Miss Isabel Oldham, Pansies. This, as far as I can tell, is the highest honour she ever received in the judgments. All of these paintings are part of an album that she compiled and are tipped in on the pages, and we have this album to show you afterwards. Does anyone have any guesses about which mountain this might be? I have a theory, but anyway, possibly Mount Ida, maybe. It's a bit far away though. And some of her watercolours as well. So these are some of the other artists in the cohort. So top left is Joseph Connor. In the middle there is Margaret Anderson Hope and Isabel Oldham. Down the left there is Mabel Hookey, and the last one is Mary Morton Allport. And you can see stylistically interesting parallels. The next time she exhibited her work was in 1917. Then in 1918, the catalogue shows that she exhibited mountain berries and autumn berries, selling each for £2, 2 shillings. Prices comparable to Margaret Hookey, Joseph Connor, and Margaret Hope. Whether or not they actually sold is unknown. And if you're wondering how and whether World War I was impacting the Art Society, here's a little snippet from the 1918 catalogue. Art and the War. And they use this image of Aphrodite on the cover of at least a couple of years running, possibly in an effort to lend the society a certain ancient Greek gravitas. As well as the collection of oil botanicals in Allport, the two sketchbooks we acquired in 2016 contain astonishingly beautiful watercolours. So these are... Oh, and this is just very random. This is copied from something else. So weird. Oh, okay. In 1896, Ada's mother, Frances, took over as proprietress of the property West Stella, where they went to live for 7 years. She did not own the building, but essentially ran the business. This would have been an ideal financial solution for Frances, being paid and having accommodation included. and at the time it was being run as a private family hotel. Frances received rave reviews for the work she did to improve conditions at Westella. So you're no doubt familiar with the building, and it was built by Henry Hopkins in 1835. Fern Rowntree notes in her story of Westella that as there was no town hall in Hobart Town in 1837, the proclamation regarding the death of William IV and the accession of Queen Victoria was read from the steps of Westella, the finest house in Hobart Town. However, she writes, we must remember that the steps were altered when, and I love this bit, Elizabeth Street was straightened. Fern theorises that Westella was named after the historian John West of Launceston, friend of the family and who conducted Henry Hopkins' funeral when he died. A writer in 1894 observed, among the distinguished visitors whose names are entered in the archives of Westella, I find many English travelling lords and colonial celebrities. The Cyclopedia of Tasmania in 1900 noted, Mrs. Butler, proprietress of this establishment, has been here for 4 years, and during that time it has been very considerably improved. The sanitary arrangements throughout the establishment are perfect. Trams pass the door every 15 minutes, both ways. No doubt Ada, aged then in her mid-20s, had a considerable role in working hard to improve Westella. Her descendants note that she was always by her mother's side. Frances Butler continued there until the end of 1903. From 1904 to 1905, it was occupied by Henry Sermon, and from 1906 to 8, when the school moved to Royden House in Patrick Street, Westella was the home of the girls' high school. Slightly off topic here, but room 2 was the office of the headmistress, and incidentally, it was in this room that Martha Hopkins, who was Henry Hopkins' daughter, found an escaped convict hiding under, or perhaps behind, a sofa. Martha is reported as having been praised for giving no indication to the convict of her having noticed his presence, and so possibly saving her life.
Good story.
In the 1920s, Westella was sold to the Crozier family, and in 1943, during the war, was leased by the Country Women's Association. In 1945, it was sold to the Tasmanian government, which continued to lease it to the CWA. In the 1960s, the Education Department needed more office space, so they moved in. After Ada Butler and Frances's stint at Westella, her and her mother leased a property from Ada's grandfather Edward, who bought Dilcala in Glenorchy in 1903. Oh, here's the ad for Westella. So this is the cottage that they lived in up to that. Ada's brother, Otley, had also had to help support Frances and Ada financially, and as a result of this was forced to delay his own marriage to his fiancée Dora, as he was not able to afford both. Otley did eventually marry Dora, and they moved to Hobart after the poor guy had a botched eye operation and resulted in his early retirement. Ada Butler never married or had children of her own. Though they were clearly close throughout her life, Ada's mother, Frances, was described to me by descendants as a bit of hard work. And I think you can get a real sense of the dynamic between these two from this image. Also, in a couple of postcards that Ada's mother sent to her poor son, Otley, the one who was financially supporting her and sacrificing his own happiness, etc. She writes, I'm going to see Martin tomorrow about the furniture. He told me yesterday he'd not heard from you. You better send it once. That was the whole postcard. Shout out to Kate for helping me to decipher that. So the most recent work we have in the collection by Ada Butler is dated 1920, which brings us sadly to the close of her short life. 4 years before the death of her mother, Ada died at the age of 48 in 1922, and this is the last photo we have of her. I know it looks older than 48 though, but I think it's just the hair. They did, yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
They look quite older than that really.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was hard work done, so.
Her death record noted, her death notice read, Ada Frances Butler, dearly beloved, only daughter of Mrs. F.M. and the late Allport Butler. Her father had already died as well. She died as an interstate spinster on the 15th of July 1922, having lived with her mother her whole life. And her death record states that she died at home. However, there was no cause of death listed anywhere or an official inquest, which got me very curious. But then the family informed me that she actually died of a stroke. It seems that she was at her brother Otley's residence at the time, which is listed as her place of death, which was Rye Hope on Main Road, Sandy Bay. One other slightly creepy fun fact the family shared with me was, it doesn't actually have any bearing on her career or anything, but Ada's descendant was going through the kitchen cupboards looking for something in the house, Steelcolour, where Ada had lived with her mother. They came upon a paper bag. Inside was quite a fair amount of human hair, long tresses. And he asked his aunt, and she said it was Ada's hair. So her mother must have kept it. In summary, Ada Butler was one of many women artists who have largely been forgotten. Over the course of her short career, she developed a unique style and demonstrated a clear affinity for native Tasmanian flora. As the youngest child and a female, there was often an implied role of parental caretaker. However, she died before her own mother. Her upbringing was difficult and financial insecurity plagued them. She painted throughout the course of her entire life, from the time she was a child right up until her death, and the family always treasured her art. Her work is on par with other more widely known artists of the time. She achieved some modest success and was well known within her circle of artists, though never broke into the mainstream. Nevertheless, her contribution to the early stages of the Art Society of Tasmania and body of surviving works deserves more recognition, and I hope I'll be able to contribute to a biography for her in the Design and Art Australia database. Thank you very much. So, yes, as I mentioned, please come and have a look at her artworks if that interests you. Thanks again.
Anyone like this question?
Any questions? Sorry.
Any questions?
Sure.
Yeah. So you've got quite a lot of original works here. Are they in any other archives in there that you're aware of?
No, so there aren't any holdings in any other public institutions that I'm aware of. None at TMAC.
And how big is the collection?
The ones that we have here, we have about 30 examples.
And you can look at that and arrange it through the Allport.
Yes, so most of them have been digitised online, although they're not at very high resolution, and then the more recent sketchbooks are yet to be digitised, but I am hoping to get them digitised in the next couple of years. But yes, you can arrange to view them by web.
Thank you very much, Caitlin.
Before we close, before you all come up and have a chat with Caitlin to see the paintings, just to let you know, of course, this is only the start of National Family History Month, and you can all come back maybe next week for a talk with Nick Hands from National Archives Australia, and he'll be talking about farmers of the Huon. So history of Tasmanian apples. So anyway,
Thanks again.
thank you. We look forward to having you all come and have a look at the painting.